Intel didn't just help build the modern computer, it was the modern computer. For decades, Intel Silicon sat quietly beneath almost every meaningful digital experience on Earth. From home PCs to corporate servers, from universities to governments, Intel chips powered the invisible machinery of the world. Progress itself felt synchronized to Intel's rhythm. Every new generation of chips meant faster software, better graphics, and more capable systems. Intel wasn't chasing innovation, it was pacing it. The industry didn't ask where computing was going. Intel told it. Then artificial intelligence arrived, not as a new application, not as another workload, but as a complete redefinition of what computation was for. And when that happened, Intel didn't fail dramatically. It didn't collapse. It didn't miss the moment in an obvious way. Instead, the center of the industry quietly shifted, and Intel found itself standing where the future used to be. This is the story of how the most dominant technology company of its era lost relevance not through incompetence, but through success, and why the AI revolution was never a war Intel could win. The empire that shaped thinking. Intel's real power was never just performance, it was standardization. The x86 architecture became the common language of computing. Developers didn't think about Intel, they assumed it. Software was written once and expected to run everywhere, because Intel made that possible. Entire ecosystems grew around that stability. Enterprises built infrastructure that would last decades. Governments standardized procurement. Universities taught computing using Intel-based systems. This wasn't just market dominance, it was institutional dependence. That dominance created certainty. Computing felt solved. The rules were known. Performance would improve gradually. CPUs would get faster. Software would follow. Innovation happened inside boundaries Intel already controlled. This shaped Intel's worldview. The future, in Intel's eyes, wasn't disruptive. It was incremental. The CPU would remain the brain. Everything else would remain peripheral. That assumption worked until it didn't. When computing changed its shape, artificial intelligence didn't arrive loudly. It arrived quietly, in research labs and academic papers. Early neural networks didn't look like a revolution. They looked inefficient, experimental, and impractical, but beneath the surface, something fundamental was happening. Traditional software is sequential. Instructions follow instructions. CPUs are built to handle this efficiently. AI workloads, especially neural networks, are different. They involve massive amounts of identical mathematical operations happening simultaneously. This wasn't an optimization problem. It was a geometry problem. AI needed width, not speed, parallelism, not precision. And GPUs originally designed to render graphics were accidentally perfect for this. The center of computing began to drift away from the CPU. Intel saw AI coming. What Intel didn't see was that AI would stop treating the CPU as the center of the universe. Intel's logical mistake. Intel's response made sense inside its own framework. AI would be accelerated. CPUs would still orchestrate everything. Specialized hardware would act as assistants, not replacements. This was logical. It was also fatal. AI didn't want an assistant. It wanted control. Training large models didn't revolve around CPUs. They revolved around clusters of GPUs working together at scale. Inference pipelines didn't wait for CPUs to decide, they flowed around them. The CPU was no longer the brain. It was becoming infrastructure. Intel optimized for leadership in a world where leadership no longer mattered. NVIDIA's quiet masterstroke. NVIDIA's advantage wasn't raw silicon, it was foresight. Long before AI dominated headlines, NVIDIA invested in making GPUs programmable for general-purpose computing. CUDA wasn't flashy. It wasn't marketed as revolutionary. It was simply useful. Researchers adopted it because it worked. Universities taught it because it was available. Startups used it because it scaled. This created a feedback loop. More users meant better tools. Better tools meant more users. Over time, CUDA stopped being a choice and became an assumption. By the time AI exploded into the mainstream, The most important decisions had already been made years earlier, quietly, by developers. AI didn't standardize on NVIDIA because NVIDIA was better. It standardized because NVIDIA was there first. Why software decides everything? Hardware can be replaced. Software ecosystems cannot. Developers don't switch platforms lightly. They build careers on tools. Companies build pipelines on frameworks. Research builds on previous work. Intel could build competitive accelerators. It couldn't rewrite millions of lines of existing code. Every alternative Intel proposed came with hidden costs: retraining, rewriting, risk. NVIDIA's ecosystem, even when imperfect, offered certainty. In technology, certainty beats potential. By the time Intel's offerings matured, the cost of switching had become too high for the industry to justify. The Apple moment. Apple leaving Intel wasn't just a business decision, it was a philosophical break. Apple wanted full control, performance per watt, custom accelerators, and machine learning woven directly into the architecture. Intel's model shared roadmaps, generic CPUs, long cycles couldn't support that vision. Apple Silicon proved something dangerous. Intel was no longer essential. Once that realization set in, the psychological foundation of Intel's dominance cracked. The industry saw proof that custom silicon, vertical integration, and alternative architectures could outperform traditional models. Intel wasn't being attacked, it was being routed around. The trap of legacy. Intel's greatest strength became its greatest constraint. Existing customers demanded stability. Enterprises couldn't afford radical change. Contracts locked Intel into supporting old architectures, while competitors built clean slate designs optimized for AI. Intel couldn't abandon the present to chase the future, not without destroying its own business. AI rewarded companies without legacy obligations. NVIDIA didn't have to protect a CPU empire. Apple didn't have to maintain compatibility for decades. Intel did. This wasn't a failure of intelligence or effort. It was a failure of positioning. Too late is not the same as wrong. Intel eventually recognized the shift. Massive investments followed. New fabs, new accelerators, new strategies. But timing matters more than intent. By the time Intel reacted fully, the industry had already standardized elsewhere. Not because Intel was incapable, but because the ecosystem had moved on. Technology doesn't wait for fairness. It rewards alignment, ending the real lesson. Intel didn't lose the AI war in a single decision or a single year. It lost because it won the previous era so completely that it shaped its assumptions about how the future should behave. But revolutions don't respect incumbents. They don't adapt to existing power structures. They build new ones. The AI revolution didn't destroy Intel. It simply made Intel optional. And in technology, being optional is the beginning of the end.